Okay, everybody, this is Rock Hard Caucus. This is the 148th episode of Rock Hard Caucus. This is a show it's about Iowa politics and Iowa culture and just the goings-on of the state of Iowa. Kind of a strong, more locally focused usually, because I live around Iowa City, so I know people here and I know stuff that's going on here. For example, a recent subject of interest for the past couple of months has been the abrupt closure of the Rape Victim Advocacy Program at the University of Iowa. They claim that they are transferring all of the services and everything from RVAP over to the Domestic Violence Intervention Program, which is not university affiliated. And there's a whole lot of complications to that. You can read about, a lot of details about this in, for example, Zachary Orensmith's Iowa Public Radio pieces from last week. Go pretty in depth. But we're going to go even more in depth right now because I have sitting across from me in my living room a former employee of RVAP, Storm O'Brink. Welcome to my house and welcome to the show, Storm.
Thank you so much for having me. I am ready to say anything.
Yeah, so I've been reading, mainstream media reports about this ongoing situation, and the coverage has been pretty good, I think. But I know that there's stuff that's going unsaid so far in the sort of mainstream coverage of this, because I don't know. There's just places that they can't go. But this is a podcast where we can go anywhere. So things, we're going to get the real dirt, I think, from Storm. Storm knows a lot.
Oh, do I know?
About what led to this and what, I don't know, maybe can you tell the future, do you think?
I have some predictions about the future. Some of them I hope I'm wrong about, but I think I'm highly likely to be right.
Yeah. So let's start with some very basic stuff. What did you do at RVAP?
What didn't I do? So I had my fingers in practically every pie when I was at RVAP. So my title was volunteer coordinator. That does not even begin to explain all the shit that I was doing.
Yeah.
So we'll break it down into different parts. So the volunteer coordinator portion of it dealt with specifically managing our pool of anywhere between 60 to 80 volunteers. It depended on the point in the year, of course, because we had more in the fall than we did in the spring, typically, and especially less over the summer because people would graduate and the new volunteers would come in the fall.
Right. So these are mostly like college students volunteering.
I would say mostly, yeah. We had like a small collection of 10% or less who were community-based volunteers. And I was always really happy when I got those because we could retain them a lot easier because they don't just move away and go to grad school.
Right.
So I was in charge of managing those volunteers and specifically the direct service side of it, not the prevention side. So those volunteers were going into hospitals and police stations, typically as someone was considering having a rape kit collected or reporting to the police. So they were operating on an on-call rotation, the day shift or the night shift. And then I was also in that role, responsible for training them 3 times a year and putting on this big 32-hour training that you need for victim counselor certification. Okay. And so that involved coordinating the entirety of our RVAP staff, some of our interns, some of our overnight people to help facilitate that. Then, on top of that, I was also managing the overnight staff. So there were 7 overnight employees, that were doing the on-call rotation shifts. They're called SBUs. It stands for staff backup.
Okay.
And so they, were basically the people who were dispatching the volunteers and providing the additional support and fielding the crisis lines overnight, when the Iowa Victim Service Call Center could not take the call and we needed somebody that was in the district.
Okay.
Then, okay, so
there's so much to this.
So that's half one of my job.
Right.
Half two is the direct service component and technical assistance portion. So, I worked directly with survivors on everything from like the stuff that's considered core advocacy, like hospitals and police stations, up to like doing interventions with people's landlords, going to court with them. I'm also a full spectrum doula and childbirth educator. So I have attended births of survivors as a part of this agency. I did a lot of work specifically with survivors of medical violence, LGBTQ populations, incarcerated survivors, and sometimes a combination of all three of those. But those were my areas of expertise. And so, unfortunately, the survivors of medical violence tends to bleed into just about every category of marginalized person that there is, more likely to experience it. So in the direct service work that I was doing, that influenced some of the policy related work and the work that I was doing to do technical assistance. So I also do trainings on all sorts of topics. And, things related to medical violence, typically doula services, LGBTQ populations were all the things that I would provide trainings on. And then sometimes people would just ask for my opinions for certain committees, projects, classes. I helped construct like course curriculum in a couple different places. So I was really all over the place for the last 6.5 years of my life.
I like, so opinion giver, that was not part of your title, but that was part of what you did, was give opinions.
Oh, yeah. I will tell people when they're right or wrong.
Cool. Okay. So hopefully we can get some of those opinions on the record today as we have this discussion. One detail that you mentioned just now, doula services and LGBTQ advocacy. Those were two things that, as I was like researching the reporting on this so far, two things that RVAP advertised as stuff that they did up until I think some point last year, where those things were taken off of the website.
Yes.
Okay, so do you know like when that happened and why that may have been hidden, a hidden service off the menu at RVAP?
Lord. Okay. So the two services that you're referring to are trauma-informed doula services and the Queer Health Advocates Program.
Yeah.
That second one that I had, so that was a program that we got a seed grant for in 2019. That was me and Kimmy and Drayson Reed's brainchild. And it was based on work that we'd previously done with transformative healing, where trans survivors mostly had said one of the big things they wanted was healthcare related advocacy, because of prior experiences with medical violence. So we'd been doing that.
Like you go to a doctor's appointment with them and stuff like that?
Yeah. Kind of like helping people get their needs met. So like, I'm trying to think of some of the things that I've done as an advocate before. For instance, like I have worked with people who couldn't do tests like the standard way, so we'd be trying to negotiate alternative routes for doing certain types of lab testing.
Yeah.
Or other times where, maybe someone was particularly traumatized from sexual violence, and they're like, I cannot get a pap smear while awake. And so I would work with doctors and help that person try and find a route to be anesthetized for the procedure, because that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
And so helping them get their needs met.
It's not something you really want to go in and ask for alone.
Right. Like all these, just like all sorts of like creative solutions that typically aren't going to be offered. And so we had a really good run, with the Queer Health Advocates Program. However, in the 2022 program review, so I'll back up. So the University of Iowa...
this gets mentioned a few times in Zach's reporting for IPR.
Yes. So the University of Iowa requires every department to go through a program review. You select 3 reviewers, and then they will provide feedback. They will interview community stakeholders, and they will also be holding you to a set of standards that you can hopefully have some influence over. Mm. So then, the standards that we decided to set ourselves to were the Iowa CASA's program standards, Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault.
Okay. Yep.
Those program standards haven't been updated in a very long time, and they were well due for an update, but we didn't have any other standards to compare ourselves against at the time. Yeah. And also because we're choosing people who were outside. They didn't really, at least of the victim services industry in Iowa, they didn't really have a lot of nuance for things that they should take into consideration when they were doing the review. We picked them because we thought that they would give us honest feedback that we could use, even if it was brutal at times. However, they're not without influence from the University of Iowa, because they are working very closely with people from the U throughout that whole process.
Right.
And so in the 2022 program review, they didn't actually interview survivors for it, which is kind of crazy, because those are the people receiving the service.
Right.
Yes.
So they interviewed staff.
So they interviewed all of our staff.
Okay.
And then they interviewed campus partners that we had. And then they compared it to the Iowa CASA standards and noted some other things that had been going on within the agency, which were also like kind of noted in something that's termed the Lupe report. And there we had hired these victim service agency influenced. So they'd worked in victim services, consultants that were a part of a firm to come in and help us try and change the workplace culture. And so that's what the Lupe report is. That's referenced in the 2022 program review, which is referenced by Zach. But in that program review, they wanted us to eliminate the Queer Health Advocates Program, eliminate doula services. And so they didn't actually give a very good rationale for the elimination of either of those programs. They wanted us to eliminate therapy services, and we were providing therapy and also counseling by interns. And then they told us to pause the voluntary anti-racism groups that we were having to try and help change the workplace culture around racism.
Sure. Yeah,
so it's like everything that they targeted were all services that marginalized survivors were most likely to use, and they wanted us to strengthen core services, which was the services that white cis women are most likely to use. So that includes things like hospital accompaniment, police station accompaniment, and hospital accompaniment only for like forensic sexual assault exams. And then take back the crisis lines, although most other victim service centers in Iowa had transferred their lines to the Iowa Victim Service Call Center, and then the call center would take calls that needed like immediate attention over to whoever your on-call advocate was. So we weren't really different from the other centers in that regard.
Right.
But they wanted us to focus just on that. They also wanted us to stop doing the non-traditional support groups, and I think do the traditional support groups that are just like, here's how people are affected by rape. Here's how you can heal from it. Okay, bye. We've had 6 sessions. Whereas like we were doing cool shit. Like, I mean, we had a Dungeons and Dragons based group. We had a sewing based support group, art groups. We had a cooking group that was for LGBTQ Latina youth.
So this was like a more fun, environment in which to discuss these issues.
Yeah. Because, well, it was about like, it's about community building, because what's the thing that trauma does? It separates you from your systems of support. It isolates you. And so in trauma healing, you have to reintroduce connection and get used to being able to do that and considering other human beings safe.
Right. Yeah. Maybe make another reason for you to join together as a group aside from just like discussing your trauma. It turns out people don't really like talking about being raped for 6 straight sessions every week. Give them something else to look forward to, maybe. So what was their stated reason for stripping back all of these extra in quotes, things that you were doing and trying to focus more on what they called core services?
They said that, so some of them they didn't provide a rationale for. The doula services, no rationale. Queer health advocates, not really much of a rationale at all. The rest of them, they said, well, you're overworked. You have employees that are working over 40 hours a week. So because you don't have the capacity for all of this stuff, we think that you should only be focusing on the core related services. But
Yeah.
like if we're doing just core services, there is functionally no point to our program, because you're supposed to strive towards comprehensive services. Not to say that core services aren't needed, but like you can't just refer a survivor to a therapist and say, well, I did my job. That's it. There's been healing afoot and call it a day.
Sure, yeah. You just fill out the right form and then you never see that person again. And that means that you're done. The job's done, right?
And then it's basically a referral service.
Yeah.
Like, and people have Google, so like they don't need you if you're just a referral service.
Sure, yeah. In terms of being overworked and understaffed, maybe you said that you were coordinating 60 to 80 volunteers.
Yes.
So there's a lot of people involved in providing these services.
Yes. And that was something that I wanted to do, was mobilize the volunteers for more than just the core services, because to be quite honest, with the volunteers and the SBUs, the core services were covered. That wasn't really within question. We had a lot of issues with the Iowa Victim Service Call Center and the way that they fielded calls, which is where a lot of the problems started that we were being critiqued on. But as far as actually getting the on-call covered, we were fine. We've been fine for a while.
Yeah. Where I was going with that to ask you about, so if they were trying to tell you that you're overworked and understaffed, they then, in their announcement that they were closing your program and transferring services to this other program, they are in the process of that laying off everyone, right?
That's correct.
So, I mean, all these services that they are claiming are not being sufficiently covered by the workforce that they already had. Is DVIP intending to hire the same number of people or more to, maybe sufficiently be able to provide those services with a good number of employees?
No.
Okay.
So they're saying, so they at first quoted us with 10 to 15, and then it changed later from 8 to 12, and nobody acknowledged that a change had happened. We were, I guess, just getting gaslighted into the 10 to 15 number never existing.
Yeah. Okay. And the 10 to 15 is less than the full-time and part-time employees that RVAP had, which was 19 or 20?
It was 19.
It was 19, okay.
Yeah.
Even though the initial announcement from the university said 12.
Yes.
They missed all the overnights, right?
Yes. And I'm going to tell you, this is what they're saying. They're saying that because all of those 12 people were on special compensation contracts, that they don't work for RVAP.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, that begs the question, where do they work if not for RVAP?
Yeah, so they're contract employees.
Yeah,
basically.
They're contracted to RVAP. But apparently not. And I'm like, okay, so do you just think they're employees of the University of Iowa? And to whom are they providing services to?
Right.
Honestly, I just think that they did that because they're really embarrassed about the fact that they didn't know our program well enough to know how many employees we had.
Yeah.
So when the news came out, it was like, okay, so this is the timeline of events, right? I get laid off at 1:30 p.m. I'm out of there by like 2 or 2:30 p.m.
Yeah, and this would have been like the beginning of April, right?
Yeah, this was on April 4th. And then I went back to the office. I was crying in Sumaya's office. And then I heard my phone ping and I saw the email from Sarah Hansen. And I said, are you fucking kidding me? Because I realized that if that email was going out, there is no way that any of the staff that I supervise knew yet, and HR had forgot to talk to them.
So just so I have this straight, you had a meeting where you were laid off, and they told you that it's because they were closing RVAP, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then immediately the email from Sarah Hansen had gone out to the entire what's the word? The
Division of Student
entire
Life.
Division.
The whole thing.
That you were sort of under the umbrella of. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to frantically call every single employee that I had, trying to get a hold of them before they had to find out via email. Some of them, unfortunately, found out via email because
Yeah.
I couldn't get to them fast enough.
Email is quick. Yeah.
Yep.
It gets to your phone right away.
Well, and then I couldn't get it out to the volunteers. I was like, I can't call all 64 of you right now. So I sent out an email that started this whole thing.
That's
where
the one that leaked, right?
That's the one that leaked, yes. So, and I don't actually know who leaked it because it appears multiple volunteers leaked my email across the university. There was my friend Nora Wolf that's in the music department is like, hey, I got a copy of this email. I didn't realize it was from you. I'm like, Nora, what are you doing with my email? You're in the music department.
Like we just said, email travels really fast.
Well, and then
you can forward them. Yeah.
Because it got leaked, then everyone's like, well, okay, something's up with RVAP because look at what the volunteer coordinator is writing. Mm-hmm. And so now there have been questions, and at first I was really freaked out. I didn't know that my email had been leaked. So I went home. We were having soup for the family that evening, which is this, I gather all my friends for homemade cooking on Thursdays.
Yeah.
And Layla, was texting me and she was like, hey, I'm so sorry about, your workplace. Like, do you need anything? Do you want me to come by? And I let her come by. And then she, was like, oh, like, yeah, Riley sends her condolences. And then I was like, okay. I'm like, I don't understand how everyone is knowing. And then she's like, oh, it's the Daily Iowan article.
Oh,
You're quoted in it. And I'm like, what?
Yeah. The student newspaper quoted a leaked email and hadn't, contacted you at all before they did that, right?
They could have called me. My number is on the signature. They had my number. They could have called, but they didn't.
Right.
And then that started a nightmare that at first I was like, I can't believe they did this. But then later I was like, you know what? I'm okay with that because it got the truth out. So,
yeah. I mean, that came out before any official press release from the university. Your leaked email was out in the world before they could sort of preempt it with here, I'll quote it. This is the...
Do you have my email?
I don't have your email pulled up. I do have the university's statement from April 4th, which I think was hastily released once your email had been leaked. Just a couple things from it. DVIP will continue to offer support services for victim survivors of intimate partner violence and add sexual assault support services that are currently being offered by RVAP by September 30th. All services will remain free and confidential. Current services being provided to victim survivors by both agencies will continue uninterrupted. And one other quote from that press release: the transition will not affect the role of advocates as outlined in the university's policy on sexual harassment and sexual misconduct, nor will it affect the ability of students, faculty, or staff members to access advocacy services.
I don't think there's one person this side of the Mississippi that believes the word that's in that fucking press release.
Yeah, so to make it clear, I don't know if we've said this explicitly while we've been talking, but DVIP is not a university program.
Yes.
They are not part of the university. And so they're in the university statement, they're saying, everything that's being transferred over to DVIP will still be, as they say, it will not affect the role of advocates as outlined in the university's policy. Well, they're not going to be subject to the university policy at all, right?
It depends.
Maybe
Occasionally,
they're giving some money that has that string attached.
They'll be subjected to some university policy around Title IX proceedings, specifically with what they can have access to, what they're allowed to do within their role, and the rules of decorum during Title IX hearings.
Okay, yeah.
But they theoretically should not be subjected to most university policies.
Right. Like the university is relinquishing all of its responsibilities for these services by passing them off to another agency, right? So how could they have as much say over the conditions of those services when they are completely absolving themselves of any involvement anymore?
I mean, basically, yeah. They say that they're funding, or rather continuing to fund the campus advocate position, but we don't really know what that's going to look like or how long they're going to do that for. I could see them doing it for maybe up to a year and then saying, you're on your own, kid, for whichever organization ends up actually taking this service on.
Yeah. And the claim that services will be completely uninterrupted. The timeline of this transition is also a major concern of everybody who's commenting on the situation at all. For example, I've got this letter from Elizabeth Barnhill, who
Beth. We love Beth.
wrote a piece for the Des Moines Register about this.
God bless Beth.
You know, I didn't pull any quotes about that. Hold on.
That's okay.
But we will talk about her letter. Here we go. This is actually from Zachary Oren Smith's second piece for IPR about the constrained timeline here. They're going to transfer everything from RVAP to DVIP over the course of 5 months from announcement to completion. Yep. This is from Zach's report. When successful, these transitions to multi-service providers took an average 19 and a half months to develop.
Yes.
The University of Iowa's announced closure date for RVAP is 5 months away.
Yes.
So 19 and a half, that's, almost 2 years. And we've got less than half of a year. And I think another detail in that quote that is, this actually does relate to Elizabeth Barnhill's letter. Transfer of these services from an organization that is specifically dealing with sexual assaults and that kind of trauma, as opposed to DVIP, which is sort of a broader services related to all kinds of domestic violence, as is in their name. There's been studies that show that, like, the sexual part of that is, when it's less of a focus, they just don't help as many people. Right?
We know dual services don't work.
Yeah.
There's a reason, like, there have been numerous reports. Beth talks about it. She's been on committees related to them. She's actually the one who taught me about this as a concept when I was a young advocate back in 2016. Because I actually used to work for Transformative Healing under Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault before that also got defunded. Because everything I touch gets defunded.
I don't think it's your fault.
No, it's mostly the fault of Republicans.
Right.
But, no, so, like, the dual services don't end up working because DV cases tend to be very resource heavy, and that's where the advocate skills tend to center the most. And so the sexual assault survivors that perhaps most of their needs are related to emotional processing and grief, their needs get put on the back burner in organizations like these. And so, like, there are some places across the U.S. where they barely have rape crisis response to their local hospitals because of all of the resources and money getting pooled into DV services. Like, even back when we had the 2017 budget cuts to victim services, they all targeted sexual violence centers and sexual violence related services. So, like, it's been a consistent pattern for years and years throughout most of the United States to prioritize DV funding and put SA funding and SA services on the back burner. Right. I know from talking to other friends who've been in dual programs that used to work for RVAP, they've said, this is a bad idea, and it does not work.
Right. There's been studies that Elizabeth Barnhill cited in her letter to the Des Moines Register. In 2013, a statewide initiative of the Iowa Attorney General's office, which at the time was Tom Miller, a Democrat, and is now Brenna Byrd, a Republican. Yep. It has gotten worse.
Yes.
The Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault, which you just mentioned, and the Iowa Coalition Against Domestic Violence, so this was three agencies cooperating on this statewide initiative, decided to restructure services in Iowa and create separate sexual assault services. Sexual assault survivors needed more focused services. The creation of a separate services became a national model between fiscal year 2014 and 2019. As a result of this initiative, there was a 275% increase in the number of sexual assault survivors served.
Yep.
So just the understanding that focusing an agency's resources on just sexual assault services had a huge impact. 275% increase in the number of survivors who were served.
Yep.
Just from separating this out from the larger umbrella of the, as you called them, DV services.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm very concerned about this, actually.
Yeah, this is just something that happened like a decade ago. And now we are apparently switching back despite data.
The evidence.
Yeah, like we know that this was the correct move.
Yep. Yeah, this is really bad because we're not following in line with actual evidence-based practice now.
Right.
By combining these two programs together.
Right. So why are we doing it? Is it as simple as they just want to save money at the cost of, not serving people who need it?
So here are my hot takes. Okay. So if I look at what happened, there could have been different options than the one that we took. So a secret that a lot of people don't realize is that RVAP staff had talked about the potential for trying to start conversations to go independent as a 501c3 away from the university. I know there are a lot of our allies that do not support that because they believe that services should be embedded within the university and that the university has a responsibility to survivors on their campus.
Yeah.
And they do.
Yeah, and they fail in that responsibility.
And that was actually why. So we wanted to potentially go to...
Can I just note that the RVAP has been around for like 50 years?
51.
51 years.
Yes.
And so when were these conversations taking place? Do you know?
All over the place. Specifically over the last 3 or 4 years, they've gotten really heavy. But there have been other times throughout RVAP's history that they have had these conversations, including back in 1999 and back in 2018 as well. So with that being said, we had wanted to become a 501c3, but we didn't think that the university was going to be keen on the idea because the optics would look really bad if they got rid of their rape crisis center. And you know what? We lost that bet. As it turns out, they care about optics sometimes.
Yeah.
So we couldn't go independent. If they had the conversation, involved us in the dissolution process, or just talked to us at any point, we probably would have told them, yes, let's work towards a sustainable plan. Let us become an independent 501c3. That wasn't what they wanted to do. So the way that the idea hatched, this is what I know from watching it and talking to Zach, it hatched out of Diane Funk specifically.
Who was the interim director for the past 6 months prior to the
something like that. Yeah. So Diane used to be a director of RVAP back in the 90s and 2000s. And then she moved on to other jobs, ended up retiring. And then they sought her out and she was appointed into the interim position when our old director, Adam Robinson, left. Diane, had, along with, Carla Miller, who had also been a previous director of RVAP, filed some complaints against our organization because our doors were not easy to walk in or open to the public, namely because we had staff security concerns at the time with somebody who was stalking someone who was a part of our team.
Yeah.
And so we didn't want to just leave the doors open. And also, we're not unique. DVIP does that too.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, Emma Goldman also has secure doors. Yeah.
So they're all doing it because this is the world that we live in. So they had the complaints about that. They had the complaints about our crisis line going through the Iowa Victim Service Call Center. So they filed those with the university, and I think that's how they got into contact with Sarah Hansen, who appointed Diane, sought her out, and then appointed her after those complaints were made.
That was prior to her appointment, yeah.
So then when she came into the organization, again, appointed by Sarah Hansen, she was given the 2022 program review as a blueprint for what to do.
Did that 2022 report have anything to do with the previous director, Adam, leaving his position?
How so?
I mean, did it make his job more difficult, or did he not want to, facilitate that plan?
He helped us all in resisting a lot of the elements of that plan. We resisted most of the plan's suggestions about closing down all those programs because we felt it would mean throwing marginalized survivors under the bus, and we could not ethically do that.
Yeah, of course.
However, Sarah and Diane felt differently. And so then, I think this is just me speculating, but I'm allowed to do that on the podcast, apparently.
Oh yeah, we love speculation, we love conjecture, we love lying. No, none of this is lies, but these are all Storm's well-informed suspicions and the conclusions that you've come to with the evidence that you have available to you.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a lot more evidence than pretty much anyone else has.
Oh, yeah. Well, and okay, so So this is my speculation on it, is that Diane got here and she realized that she couldn't just flip a switch and do all the stuff that she wanted to do to change the program to the way that she would like it. And not only that, but in her being there were a lot of checks and balances in the university's system, and that, sat wrong with her because she was used to being able to basically do anything, kind of an if I ran the zoo situation.
Sure. And this is compared to her previous tenure in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, because she was similar. Like her and Carla had a very authoritarian perspective to leadership. So they didn't really believe in consulting all of the people who were working for the org. They believed that decisions should be made top down, essentially. And so when she, was realizing that there were a lot of checks and balances, there were also a lot of barriers within the university, and that she essentially couldn't do everything that she wanted to do, she was able to talk with Sarah Hansen enough to give Sarah Hansen the information that she was looking for, because I think Sarah had actually wanted to close the program for a while now, but she just needed somebody to get her what she needed to be able to justify doing it. And so then I think Diane, so she went behind everyone's backs. Not only that, but she didn't share her calendars with us. She made us share our calendars with her, but she said, what was it that she said? She told our colleagues that we wouldn't like what she's doing. So that's why we couldn't see her calendar. I'm not fucking with you. She really said that.
That's barely hiding it.
So so she had her first meeting with Christy from DVIP back in like January or so is what they could see on there. But then she had her last one to basically bury the program a couple days before her resignation letter for RVAP was being sent out. But we knew that she had intended to resign probably a week before her letter went out, because she had taken down her door tag from her office. She had taken out all of her stuff already. She had told our staff that she intended to leave, and only just a couple of them. Only the ones that she, I think, liked. And so then after that, so we knew that was coming. We were just kind of waiting for the official announcement. But somewhere in that week of her saying, I'm done with this, she had a meeting with Christy and Sarah. And then that was the one where they talked about the transfer, big air quotes on that, transfer of RVAP over to DVIP.
Yeah.
And that was in February, late February.
Okay.
And then a whole month went by without us knowing anything about it. But then that got uncovered by Zach, with IPR. Yeah.
Those meetings got uncovered by Zach. Okay. Yeah. So, the picture that paints is that university administration didn't want RVAP, and we can speculate on the reasons for that, but they didn't want RVAP to still be a part of the university. And they brought in an old director who also probably had prejudices against the present RVAP in order to facilitate that removal.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is what's the evidence shows happened.
Yeah, I think so.
That's what I feel happened.
Yeah.
That's what most of the staff feel happened.
Yeah. Why did Diane say she was resigning?
So these are the deets on that. So she got into a serious disagreement with our leadership team in the leadership team meetings. And she yelled.
Would you have been on that team?
I was not on that team. I just heard about it from my bestie. And so she yelled at all of them, including her own supervisor at the time, Maria Bruno.
Okay.
And had just a total outburst in it because she had philosophical disagreements with them about who should set the vision of the organization, because Maria had prompted her to work with the leadership team and set the vision for the organization going forward and talk about the mission. She did not want to engage in that conversation with them.
She didn't want it to be like a collaborative process.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And so then after her outburst, this was probably the final straw on a number of different things that had happened. So since she had gotten there, she had closed down the prevention program, said that it was related to our Office of Violence Against Women grant not being renewed, but none of the positions that were shut down were connected to the OVW grant at all. They were all connected to the Rape Prevention Education grant. So she shut down, she laid off 2 people in that, and she'd been steadily working on closing several different elements of the program. And in the process of her being there, I'm like even still nervous to like talk about it, but I think it's worth it to say it. My truth is that I experienced her as a workplace bully, as being very abusive as a supervisor. And I watched her abuse my other colleagues as well. We have spoken with lawyers about this, so you don't need to worry about us. But right before she left, we had filed a number of HR complaints against her on the basis of discrimination on multiple different fronts, some of them being national origin, disability, and race.
Yeah.
And so it's like
not good.
No, it's not. So we've got, so we file the complaints, then the outburst happens, and then she very abruptly left.
Okay.
She did not say goodbye to any of the staff. The last time that we saw her was like a day on which we had a staff meeting, and that was it. So I will speculate. I can't help but wonder if she got the resign or be fired, but she sent out an email to us saying that she was choosing to leave, that her mission had ended here, and that her time had come to leave, and that Maria would be taking over a lot of the functions and duties that she had in her place.
Yeah, that is a complicated story. Like, the university brings her in probably for the specific purpose of ending the agency, and then she gets a bunch of HR complaints against her. So then maybe that like shortened the timetable, and there's like, all right, we gotta shut down RVAP like as soon as possible now, because our chosen director is going to be forced out of the position because she can't work with any of the employees. I think like she had been arranging to close down the program since she was still an employee there. Like, she'd been arranging it months in advance of her even putting leaving on the schedule for her. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of confusing, the timeline. Like, I can tell you why did Diane leave when she did, but I can't tell you like how correlated her leaving is with the shutdown of the program.
Right.
It could also be because I think she knew that she was going to get a lot of backlash from the staff for doing this level of betrayal of not just us, but also the survivors that we served.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has there been any contact with her from any of you since her leaving?
Yes.
Okay. I assume it wasn't pleasant.
So she keeps showing up to, like, she showed up to a rally that was in support of RVAP, but her and Carla attended with her. They didn't stand in the crowd. They stood far away at the edge of the Pentacrest, watching the whole thing unfold, which felt kind of awful when we saw that happening, because we're like, why are you standing there watching us in the corner?
Yeah.
But then so it's like that happened. Then she also had showed up at Take Back the Night for reasons unbeknown to us.
Yeah. Well, this is like a long tradition, right? The Take Back the Night event. Yeah. So I'm sure it's not her first time attending.
Not at all. So she showed up to Take Back the Night, and then she had contacted some staff on the team who, had disputes with her. But as for that, like, she hasn't personally contacted most of us. I do also know that she was following my trail for a little while. So I noticed that whenever I was speaking to any entity, for instance, Council on the Status of Women, within a couple days, she followed up and she was sending out this press release that her and some of the previous directors had constructed, talking about their support for the so-called merger.
Oh, yeah, I read that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know, I think it was it KCRG or was it the Gazette that ended up actually taking the bait on publishing it?
I don't know. I did read it, though. Yeah.
Well, and it's like, okay, so like here you have all of these prior directors who were in contrast with what the staff who've been working there for years were saying.
Right. Everybody who worked at RVAP spoke out against what you called merger a minute ago, sort of.
So-called merger. I'm going to call it the dissolution.
They're doing the air quotes. You can't see it, but we're doing it.
It's a dissolution. And when I say dissolution, I mean dissolution. This is not a merger.
Right. Yeah, it's the end of RVAP for sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of, hold on. Before I get to that, you say that Diane was following your tracks. And that reminded me of what you said a few minutes ago, how she had access to all of your calendars.
Yes.
Do you think that had something to do with it?
I hypothesize maybe it's possible. And I also think so that could be one method. She could have also been finding out via other people. It's really hard to say, but I have a lot of questions as to why did she contact all of the people that we talked to?
Right. Yeah. Were there sympathetic people at all of those meetings, sympathetic to her? That seems
I don't know.
Unlikely, but
I know Council on the Status of Women looked at it, and Mandy asked me about it, and I told her my thoughts and feelings on it, and so they essentially disregarded the communication that she had sent them.
Okay.
And I was grateful because I am very much in opposition to what she's pushing.
Yeah. And what she's pushing is pretty much in line with what the university is saying, that this is merging these two programs is for the benefit of all, and all the services will go uninterrupted. DVIP is well equipped to handle all of this. Right.
Like that she's pushing this idea because it was kind of hers. I mean, it wasn't just her idea to do this.
Yeah.
I think that Sarah Hansen and other people within the university were well involved with that idea. But I mean, of course she's going to push the idea because she's the one who facilitated it.
Yeah. Okay. And also on the topic of following your trail, and I think way at the beginning of this conversation, you said something about partners within the university. So part of the advocate's job is to help survivors when they are having to file a police report or have a rape kit done or whatever. So RVAP has had to work with the university police on occasion, I imagine, right?
Yes, we have.
Okay. And you we said earlier, the university has failed to take care of its own students when it comes to sexual assault. The university police department is part of that failure for sure. For example, there were the Fiji protests a couple years ago, and then, God, was this last fall? There was another protest related to that that was going to happen at one of the frat houses, and
it was a different frat that assaulted somebody. But
yeah. And for context, the RVAP building is on a block with a bunch of the frat buildings. So
God help us.
It's very well located to take care of the victims of the frats. But anyway, there was a protest that was going to happen at one of the other frat houses, and well before any protesters could have been there, the cops just lined up all of their vehicles to form a wall in front of
There were 6 of them.
Yeah, and I don't know what they expected. I mean, obviously the Fiji protests, some wild shit happened, so maybe they expected that and didn't want that to happen again. But anyway, because you work right there, you were pretty close to where that all was going down, and a photo of you, a surveillance photo of you, was part of the discovery documents for our friend Tara McGovern's trial a couple months ago.
Yes.
And we learned some stuff about how University of Iowa Police Detective Ian Mallory feels about RVAP employee Storm O'Brink. Storm O'Bink.
Bink, the Waluigi version of me. Ian, if you're listening, because I know that you listen for personal and professional reasons, I know about that. I know about the depositions. I know all the things that you said. They confuse me. But that's my direct address to Mr. Mallory is, Ian, why? I'm a square. Like, I mean, I really am. I'm kind of a rule follower to my core. Why was I being monitored of all people?
Oh, yeah. When the closure of RVAP was first announced, I instantly thought back to those documents from the trial. And Ian said about Storm that Storm has been, critical of police in the past and has attended protests that are protesting the actions of police. And so he questions whether Storm can really be an advocate for victims when it comes to, dealing with the police side of that situation. So I had, I was thinking, like, is this why they're, like, forcing the closure of RVAP? Because Storm is, like...
Okay, I'm gonna tell you, because I know you want me to answer the question, did this influence the closure of RVAP?
Right, yeah.
I'll answer it directly. I think yes, a little bit, but it's by no means the major component of what happened.
Yeah,
I think it was one tiny piece of the puzzle that fit into the rest of it.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about it, I guess, from start to finish. This is my story about being stalked by the police. Mm-hmm. And when I say stalked, I mean stalked, because I had no idea that he was monitoring me as far back as August.
Yeah, in August, I think, is when the front thing happened.
It's like from August 29th. Yeah. So there's a PowerPoint slide of Storm O'Bink. The Waluigi version of me. So I started becoming aware of that after the Chloe Cole protest because he had said that I was engaging in perpetual street blocking behavior, which is a sick band name, by the way.
Perpetual street blocking behavior. Yeah, we learned a lot about perpetual motion at that trial. So I was a part of perpetual motion. I think that's substantiated in the footage. It's a pretty incredible scientific discovery that we unlocked the power of perpetual motion that night. Well, and okay, so part of like his critique of me is saying that you're critical of police. I think one of the things that he doesn't understand is that because I'm working with trans and queer communities, these are communities that are highly critical of the police, and they have been since the Stonewall riots. Right, yeah. And so, like, if you are a member of the trans community, if you're working with trans communities, you can't really be buddy-buddy with police. They're not going to trust you if you are a cop's friend, Right. And so, like, this isn't really like something that I can engage in if I want to continue serving trans survivors who, by the way, the majority of them don't report. He says it in the depositions that he's only worked on 2 cases with me. Right. That's it. And I've been here for 6.5 years. Like, I was not a frequent person. I imagine you had more than 2 clients. Oh, absolutely. Well, but it's like most of my clients didn't report because they were part of marginalized communities. Yeah. So most of the stuff that they were working on with me were things like, medical advocacy and housing and counseling and like trying to get connected with an EMDR therapist, all of these like other things. But reporting was usually not the thing that people came to me the most for. And so like he put me on that PowerPoint and presented that to the county attorney. I'm pretty sure because he wanted to have me arrested. That's what I think, at least. Yeah. I can't really confirm it. Most of the people in that PowerPoint were charged with crimes, but you were not. Well, and I think it's like it got to the county attorney and then she was like, no, like Storm didn't meaningfully do very much at all. Yeah. And I'm grateful for that. But then, because he couldn't get me charged in the court system, they were looking for other ways to engage in retribution against me. So they complained to my employer. They complained to Diane. Oh, okay. About me. Yeah. So their take was that, they said I was yelling at the police. I did not actually yell that whole time. I knew what I could and could not do. And that was definitely one of those things. There was a part where I screamed. In terms of like you're being careful about like your position at the university, and this is a protest at the university. And it's outside of work too. Oh, so it's like outside of work protest activities are being monitored. Right. But when they complained to Diane, who I think had also taken it up to the administrative level as well,
They said that they were concerned about my political activities outside of work. And yeah, oh, I know. And that it's, how am I supposed to be building relationships with police? That's a part of my job. If you have critical opinions of the police. And to be clear, like, I haven't really voiced a lot of critical opinions publicly until after I figured out I was being stalked by them.
Sure, yeah.
So, okay, I know
you
this...
tend to, grow a negative opinion when they're, monitoring you for no apparent reason.
And the thing is, like, so when I worked with Ian, I was actually relatively chill with him. He was very polite to me.
Yeah.
I didn't really have a lot of complaints about his work style at all. And then I started learning from friends in the community that he was behind a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And then I learned that he was monitoring me too. And that changed my opinion significantly of him.
Yeah. He's got cameras all over, and he keeps tabs on pretty much anyone who expresses dissent from the conservative sort of status quo of the university.
Yeah. And so with the complaints that UIPD put forward to Diane and also to the admins, I think that was factored into some of the decisions about shutting down RVAP, and that, like, they had also said that our community partners' opinions had been factored into the decision. When they say community partners, they almost mean campus partners exclusively.
Sure, yeah. Well, yeah, who are your community partners aside from the University of Iowa Police Department?
So many different places. I mean, just about every nonprofit in town.
That's a big part of the story is that, well, actually, it was in the press release, is that according to the university, most of the people who you provide services to are actually, they do not report an affiliation to the university.
That is correct, actually.
So a lot of your community partners are in, the surrounding counties. I think it's a 10-county service area. 8 counties. Okay.
It's like the southeastern quadrant of Iowa. And I will say, so when they took that 11% statistic that the university quoted in all of their communications, that was taken by a part-time employee who had never run a report before with our software.
Okay.
And so it was like upper management had her run that report. She didn't know what it was for.
Right.
Then those numbers got factored into what they put out to the public, but they didn't disclose that 38% of all of those clients were marked unanswered on the "Are they UI affiliated?" question.
Yeah, sure.
We intentionally didn't mark down people's affiliation because there are a lot of powerful abusers in the university. And people were afraid of having their records taken down. So
this is obviously to put it very euphemistically, this is a sensitive subject.
Oh,
and a lot of the people who are coming for services don't want anyone to know any of this about them. There were people who did not consent to us writing down that information. And I mean, those cases didn't meet the requirements for us to have to report under Clery. So we were good to go. As long as we're not mandated to write a Clery report over it, doesn't matter. And we'd also never been asked for the university from the data of what percentage of survivors do you serve that are associated with the university. So this was the first time that we had conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had to pull this data for the first time. Yeah. And so we actually think that with the paper only files that we have, it might be closer to 33%, maybe a little less, maybe a little more.
Yeah.
But that's really scary if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, for that to be they didn't say it explicitly, but obviously that factors into their decision.
Yes.
To close RVAP is well, a bunch of these people aren't even. We're not responsible for these people. They don't work here. They don't go to school here. Yeah. Why should we care about them? And that brings me to another quote from Elizabeth Barnhill. A large research institution, such as the University of Iowa, has an obligation to share its considerable knowledge and ability to assist with its neighbors.
Yes.
Which I feel pretty strongly about.
It's in their mission. Mandy Remington said it. It's in the mission of the university to help communities outside of it.
Yeah, this is not just only people within the walls of this institution are to benefit from the institution.
Right.
You get all your money from the state, and all the students that you charge tuition. But yeah, you have a responsibility to the people who live around you. And they also try to I guess we're getting into another subject, but all these trespass warnings, like anybody who is like alleged to have been involved with any kind of protest activity that crosses a certain line, according to people like Ian Mallory, they get served these trespass warnings that say they're not allowed to loiter or be on university property if they're not, traversing it to go somewhere else. Like, you own the city.
They do, basically.
It's impossible to be in Iowa City and not loiter on university property, basically.
Right. Like, it's basically like a get out of town order. And I think that's why it's not particularly enforceable. They're trying to get creative because they want to see if there's something they can have that'll stick.
Yeah. But just the general idea that, like, you can't take everything from the community in which you exist and, like, not serve the community in any way.
Right.
The university is not just like its own walled off community. It exists in Iowa City and in Iowa and in the world. I mean, fucking people fly in from all over the world to go to school here.
Yes.
We have connections to everywhere else, and you have a responsibility to provide these services to people who live around here who aren't being served by anyone else.
Right. God. They really fucked us over.
Yeah, this sucks. What else can we say about it? We've been talking for about an hour. What have we not said?
Oh, I can think of something that we haven't said yet. So something that people don't know is that back in 2023, when all of the hiring freezes were happening over the Missy centers, we were originally going to be a part of that hiring freeze, but they had to make a very strong case for us to be considered essentially an essential service.
Yeah.
And to not have us classified the same as all of the other DEI affiliated programs. What's happening to RVAP right now, make no mistake about it, is DEI related or related to anti-DEI sentiments. Because,
I'd say so, yeah.
Well, even though, okay, so that was protective of us at the time, trying to reclassify us and, you know, make sure that we don't go through the same hiring freeze because we're considered essential. But it also shows you something awful, which is that's the level of threat that we were under because of how we were classified in the university. Mm-hmm. And so, like, that's just one element of it. It's been a long-standing pattern of it going this way. You know, people don't, okay, I'm about to go off on a tangent, but it's necessary. Just hold on.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so people don't realize this about RVAP's history, but we actually had a really long history of being very exclusionary with our services. It is something I'm not very proud of, but I am proud to be a part of the people who rectified that situation when I came on there. So, RVAP used to have policies barring male advocates from serving in a direct service capacity in our volunteer program. We also had policies for our crisis line workers saying that they couldn't take calls from callers that were identified to be male, though that could also include trans feminine folks, basically anyone with a deep voice.
Sure.
And I have that
the
in
identification
writing.
Coming from the person picking up the phone.
Yep.
Right. If it sounds like a dude, hang up.
Yep. So,
and this is explicit policy. It was at the time, like written down.
It's written down. Yeah. I have a copy of it. I will share it with absolutely anyone. The one that I have from October 19th, 2004.
Yeah. And I mean, that was the policy. Like, if it sounds like a guy, you hang up.
You're supposed to
hang
up.
You
Doesn't matter
what they're saying.
We're sorry, we can't take your call. Give us a callback number. We'll have other staff call you during the daytime.
Okay.
And these are people calling
specifically for overnight calls?
This is, yeah, for the most part. So this is the crisis line.
Sure.
So people are in crisis, and that's why they're calling the crisis line. Imagine that you call the crisis line and they turn you down because you have a deep voice. That's horrific.
Yeah, but people who sound like me are in crisis sometimes.
Yeah, they are. Thank you. Well, and so, like, these were policies that were around throughout, like, the late 90s, early 2000s. According to my supervisor, that policy was in place until, I think, 2010, when they had a change of leadership over the role. And so, like, you know, that's just like one example of RVAP having this really nasty exclusionary history. And we had a reputation for doing that for years. And unfortunately, there was a lot of support at the university level for that exclusion. There are a lot of people who were there during that time period who are now in positions of power in the university who would have liked to have seen us stay that way. But back in, the mid 2010s, we started trending towards inclusion and trying to make better steps towards it. And that's when a lot of the wheels started turning for the dissolution of RVAP, which
built
finally
up tension
came.
because you were actually serving more people in the community who really needed your services.
Oh, yeah. Like anytime we tried to make our services inclusive, we'd get pushback from the university in some form, some way, some partner. Like, I mean, when we hired on Sammy Mushabe as the campus advocate, people had things to say about that because Sammy is male.
Yeah.
But hasn't really had a lot of issues, or at least hadn't, because he also quit on the same day as me on May 10th.
May 10th. I have a recording of your resignation speech. I don't know if you want that to be on the podcast.
Put it on the podcast.
Sure, let's put that at the end.
Put it on the podcast. Shame them. Read them for filth.
At the end of this episode, we'll be hearing Storm's resignation speech recorded by our friend Bryn. I don't have the date for that. When was Take Back the Night?
Fuck, I don't know. It was a Tuesday.
Yeah. But anyway.
It was in April.
Yeah. So you'll be hearing that later.
Yeah.
So Sammy had no problem doing the job.
Yeah, Sammy had no problem doing the job, but we still got pushback from campus partners who felt that he shouldn't be in the role because he was male. And, any time that, we were trying to go about and work with campus partners, ask any of my colleagues of color. They'll tell you about the racism they experienced at this institution.
Yeah.
I could tell you for days about the transphobia that I experienced at this institution. I think that the most recent and egregious example of it comes, unfortunately, from the police monitoring of the UIPD.
Yeah. We went over this extensively on previous episodes of this podcast, but only trans people were charged with crimes related to the Chloe Cole protest. I myself, on video, doing all the same stuff as a lot of those people charged with crimes, never heard a word.
Yep.
In terms of discomfort with males being in the advocate role, did you get any opinions like that from the people being served? Was anybody requesting that a male not be their advocate?
It was once in a blue moon.
Sure.
And it's often people who had repeat traumas from men throughout their lives. Yeah. But most of the time, they didn't particularly care about the gender of the advocate.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's not a reason to never employ a man in that role.
Right. Well, and I mean, okay, so back in, so a history fact, back in 1993, when Diane was the director, she turned down someone for volunteering who, was a male, and it was because they were male at the time. And so then that person later went on to start men's related anti-violence efforts in the Iowa City area.
Yeah.
And so, I knew it went back as far as 93. I don't know what it was like in the 80s. I know that we didn't get our first male advocate until it was either 1999 or 2000. And then we didn't get our first trans advocates until 2012. Mm-hmm. And it was because, the director at the time had been out, who was the primary person who was resisting it. And so they snuck in the advocates, while, she was gone. And those advocates are two friends of mine, actually.
Yeah.
And they went on to do work with doctors at UIHC to start the LGBTQ clinic and help them get that. So they were kind of a big deal.
Yeah. It sounds like it was probably a good idea to hire them.
Yeah, they were excellent advocates while they were there. But it's also crazy to think that they had policies in place where someone like me couldn't have done direct service within the last 13 years. That's crazy.
Yeah. That seems like it should be not legal to have that be official hiring policy.
It wasn't. That's why they didn't keep it written on paper, although I have some evidence of the discrimination ongoing.
Yeah. Ugh. That's nasty. Well, what do you think is going to happen from here? You have resigned, so you're not going to be affected day to day by the ongoing collapse of the program.
Yeah, I got off that ride.
Yeah.
And I was really grateful to get off that ride. So this is what I think is probably going to end up happening next. Reps at DVIP told us that they didn't have the capacity to take on the program until the fall, We've already had a number of staff leave because of people like me and Sammy, and Isabella was leaving too. And then we had some of the Southern Tier staff. Amy was also leaving. Okay, so they're going to be down to probably about half the team that they had, I'm guessing, or at least the daytime staff team, starting sometime in June, probably. That's actually really bad because it means that the gap in services is already happening right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because we left. And
well, God, how can they tell all of you, like, your jobs are going to be up in a couple months, best case scenario, and then say services will be uninterrupted?
They expected us to stay until the 30th. That's what they believed would happen.
Yeah.
Because they didn't talk to us, and they're not very bright sometimes. But no, they believed that we would stay until the end. And what they didn't realize was that most of us were not looking at DVIP for jobs because they hire at significantly less pay than we do.
That's another detail.
So we could see some of their open positions as starting at $39K on their website, and we don't even know what their benefits situation is, but we knew that for us, we had received, not the highest salaries, but like something that was decent. You could live off of it. For me, that would have been like a $4K a year pay cut to go down to 39.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, nearly $5K.
Well, I mean, that's like 10%.
Yeah.
At that level. Yeah.
So like you can't survive on that. And you also know that it's not going to be the same. The workplace culture is not the same. And, also like there's like issues that like as to why we didn't want to go over there that I won't really get into here.
I think I think this was in Jack Moore's Daily Iowan piece, which came out like a couple weeks after the initial announcement. There was like a quote from a DVIP person that said something like, yeah, we're hoping that everybody at RVAP will apply for their replacement jobs here, which seems kind of delusional to me.
Keep in mind, and I don't really like shit talking DVIP because I do think that they do amazing work, but I will say this. They also had those meetings, even though they have this relationship with us, without so much as saying a single word to any of us. Yeah. And that feels like a betrayal. Yeah. And
nobody knew until what, April 4th?
Right. Nobody knew till April 4th, but I know Christy'd been having conversations with Diane as far back as January and February.
Right.
Why didn't she knows us? Why didn't she talk to us? Why didn't any of them talk to us? And that's like, so there is like a level of betrayal that we feel about that, but it's like, we're also, I think, like willing to set it aside, for what we hope will be the services for survivors that will be comparable in quality.
Yeah.
And like, we know that if they do take it on, we want to try and work together with them to make it as good as possible, despite like, that element of betrayal that's happened here. So with DVIP not being prepared to take on any of these services, that's scary. But also when RVAP was collapsing, we found out that the grants that we were forfeiting, or the university was forfeiting, were going competitive, meaning that they'll be offered up to anyone, any victim service center who would like to take over services.
Right. So DVIP is not guaranteed the funding that you had.
No.
Yeah.
And so they're saying that they can hire 8 to 12 advocates. The question I have is, with what money?
Yeah, they don't know that for sure yet.
This is like unless, where are they going to manifest over $500,000? That would be my question. Like, I would love if they were right, because it would mean that there's going to be somewhere for survivors to get services. I really want them to be right, but I know they're not. So with that, I don't think that they're going to have anywhere near the number of advocates that they would need to have to take on this service if they get the funding. They could also be not the only people throwing their hats in the ring, and it end up going to another center, because I know some other centers had their eyes on potentially taking over services for the district or applying into those funds and seeing what they could do. Yeah.
And some of this money, the grants are being given by the Attorney General's office, right?
They're our largest funder.
Right. Okay. And Brenna Bird's most notable, media thing right now is how, victims of sexual assault have not been receiving contraceptive,
emergency contraception.
Yeah, for the past, year and a half?
Yes.
Because of her?
Well, and a lot of the counties started covering it independently when she left that gap.
Yeah.
However, they have the money to cover it. There's no reason that they can't do it. It does not cause an abortion. We know that. If it did, I would know about it. And that would be really cool if it did cause an abortion, but it just doesn't.
Right.
You have to get a whole way more extensive.
And we're talking about Plan B.
Yeah. Plan B does not so with that, the Johnson County Board of Supervisors funneled some money into that to help cover it here, but there are rural counties where it's not being covered.
Yeah. Point being, there's some hostility from the state to the way that organizations like RVAP was going about providing these services.
Yeah, I would say so. I don't think they realized the manner in which we were still connecting people to Plan B pills. So the university's official stance was that we could not give it out directly to survivors because we're not medical personnel. Granted, we had Tylenol in the office that we could give out to people. Which is actually
more dangerous,
more dangerous than the Plan B pill. But they didn't want us doing that. So then, we had a supply that we could give to sexual assault nurse examiners to do that.
Sure.
Or
just get a middle person.
Storm, the cool resident of North Liberty, could also do it occasionally outside of work hours.
Yeah. You've been quoted in the media as saying that.
Yep. I did say that. And I did do that. I did give Plan B to people who requested it.
Yeah. Which is not illegal, so it's fine for you to say that.
Yeah, it's not. It is an over-the-counter medication. You can pick it up at Walgreens. It is not prescription grade. There is nothing wrong with it. It does not cause an abortion.
Yeah, all good. You're in the
clear.
And
I am a doula. I know exactly what it does and how it works.
Yeah. This is tough. I don't know how to wrap this up in a satisfying way because so much is still up in the air,
Right, because we don't know what's going to happen to the future of victim services.
Yeah. It's not a good moment right now.
It's not.
It's very uncertain.
Yeah. What would you say to wrap this up? Keep reading the news. Keep harassing people. Not harassing. That's a criminal act. Keep voicing your opinions to people in positions of power.
They may treat you like they're being harassed, but you have the right to express yourself to people in power.
Right. As long as you don't make threats to people or continue contacting them after they've told you not to contact them.
Sure.
You are voicing your opinions. They should be listening to people's opinions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I would wrap up with saying is that the thing that's missing a lot from this conversation the whole time has been the voices of survivors. They were the people that found out last, were consulted last.
Yeah.
And not consulted at all. And, I don't know. I honestly, the people that I worked with, they were so special to me. They were just incredibly resilient and kick-ass, badass people. Although I think a lot of them would probably tell you that that's not an accurate descriptor. I would. And myself as being a survivor too, I had a lot in common with them in that sure, we didn't go through the exact same things, but I have worn similar shoes and different style and brand.
Sure. Yeah.
And
that shared experience, I'm sure, is really valuable to somebody doing that work.
Right. These were relationships that we built with these folks. Yeah. And unfortunately, I can't continue my professional relationship with a lot of the people that I was serving, but I just hope that they all end up okay.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
Well, do you have anything coming up that you may want to plug at the end of the show? Or in any websites or anything people should look at?
Okay, so these are some of my thoughts. First and foremost, because the Queer Health Advocates program isn't transitioning to the DVIP program, I am looking at trying to transition this program and its curriculum somewhere else. I am having talks with the Iowa City Mutual Aid coming up here soon to see if that is a viable option. So please stay tuned.
Cool. Yeah.
If you would like to become a queer health advocate.
Yeah.
And it's going to be way cooler.
I'm sure there's people listening to this who have an interest in that and have maybe are involved in Iowa City Mutual Aid. So
Oh yeah. Probably. Well, and I'm hoping that the group ends up taking it because I think they'd be a really good fit for it. Other things to plug. I do commissions. I have a website. I'll give you the link to my website. They're painting commissions and stuff. I paint things.
Of course. I've seen your paintings. Yeah,
now I'm going to have time to paint things because I'm not being consumed by the dissolution of one of the nation's oldest rape crisis programs. So if you would like a painting, pay me money because I'm losing my job, but I'm getting a new one tomorrow.
Well, okay. Yeah. So not too much of a gap in income at least, but, yeah, get a painting done. I'm sure Storm has a lot of emotion to express on the canvas, so it'll be, maybe your greatest work of your life.
And also, if you want to hire me for consulting projects, I have a lot of knowledge in a lot of different areas, and I can promise you that I will be 10 times more professional than I was on this podcast.
Yeah, well, Storm just demonstrated a lot of knowledge here today and strong communication skills, I think, as well. So I think you come off well from this interview. So people listening, if you'd like to contact Rock Hard Caucus for any reason, we can be called at 319-849-8733. Share your own thoughts about anything we talked about today. You can also mail us stuff in the mail, like physical mail, P.O. Box 5336 in Coralville, Iowa, 52241. I also want our Des Moines listeners to be aware that tomorrow night, the Iowa PSL is organizing a rally at Des Moines City Hall. Des Moines City Council is having some kind of meeting, I'm sure. They, I guess, recently have signed a contract with a transportation startup called VIA, which is like a van rideshare app thing. Among other problems, VIA was founded by 2 Israeli Air Force veterans. They get a lot of their startup capital from an Israeli venture capital fund. I think the largest Israeli venture capital fund. I forget the name of it. I didn't write it down. But they've signed this contract while they are sort of like cutting funding for DART, the public transportation system in Des Moines. So this is going to be a rally sort of in opposition to the VIA contract and instead calling for an expansion of DART bus services. And also asking for a ceasefire resolution for good measure because Des Moines City Council hasn't done that, as opposed to several other city councils in the state of Iowa, which are much smaller than Des Moines. I mean, it's just words on a paper. You might as well just do that at the very least, right? And if you live in Johnson County, there is an election coming up, a local election. You mentioned Mandy a few minutes ago, Storm. Yeah, our friend Mandy Remington's running for county supervisor. The primary is June 4th. I think that it's worth the effort to try to get Mandy in office. She's a good advocate for all kinds of things. Oh, yeah. I endorse Mandy, actually. I endorse her as a candidate, and I will be voting for her. Yeah, Mandy's been out there with us during a lot of the events we've been discussing today. And also, I think what sets her apart is she's been calling for the county to officially, like, not enforce state laws that are discriminatory, which not all the other candidates are brave enough to call for that. Yeah. So that primary is June 4th. If you're willing to register as a Democrat, even temporarily, and cast a vote for Mandy Remington, I think it's worth it. I'm going to do it. And related to that primary, I did learn today Bob Conrad, one of the other candidates in that primary, he's a state trooper running in the Democratic primary for Johnson County Supervisor. Back in, I think it was February, he received a $500 donation from Ian Mallory. Crazy. I just learned that today. The filings are just coming out for the first, quarter of the year or whatever. And Rod Sullivan, he's an incumbent, he received a $25 donation from Adam Herrig, who is another UIPD officer. Who I don't have as many issues with as I do with Ian Mallory. But Adam Herrig was allegedly one of the officers visiting people's homes to deliver trespass warnings over the past couple weeks. So, is he one of the people that barged into somebody's home, or was that someone else? I don't know if he barged in himself, but I've been told he was one of the cops going around visiting people's homes, was present for that barging in episode. We don't have video of that or anything, so we just kind of got to go off of hearsay with that one. But Anyway, that's two of the candidates, receiving money from UIPD officers, and Mandy is definitely not receiving their money. So that's just another point of comparison. Anyway, Storm, do you have any music recommendations to end today's show? We usually play some local music.
Oh God, what do I do?
We end up at shows together sometimes, so.
You know what? I discovered recently that I'm into industrial music, sure, as my friend Layla would put it. And so now I'm actually getting into my music app to look up what the fuck this song was called. See, my fun thing about being a person on this earth is that my grandfather was mostly deaf throughout his life. He was next to an explosion when he was a young man. And so that influenced, I think, the importance of music in my family. Like, most of the people in my family did not play instruments. It wasn't really like heavily emphasized when I was a child growing up. So I'm starting to find music more as an adult. And I have discovered that I absolutely adore industrial music. My suggestion to you is the song "Give Me Your Gate Code" by Bottom Surgery.
Bottom
Surgery. And who are all the people? Because I think Layla was on this one, actually. Yes, because this is one of the Suicide Twink songs.
Oh, great. Okay, cool. We can play a few seconds of that and then get your resignation speech in there.
Yeah, play Suicide Twink. They're good band.
Give me your gate code. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's been Rock Hard Caucus episode 148 with Storm Obrink. Thank you for divulging all of what you know. I'm sure we could have gone for another hour and just tried to dig out more of the dirt, but
thank you for having me and giving me this lovely platform to talk to all of our homies.
Yes, absolutely. It's greatly appreciated having your unique collection of knowledge of the situation to be recorded and sent out to the universe.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hit Haven with a fully automatic hammer.
Bottom Surgery live. Yeah! Yo, you live from the combination RV Phillips 66 parking lot. Experience the weird dollar. Free fucker! I wish I better not like you guys. Like your recon, it's really nice to meet ya. Fuck the bad bitch, just steal her credit card. Trying to get my dick hard, but it all got hard. Bitch, pussy.
6 years ago, I was sexually assaulted by a doctor at the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics while seeking care for my spine. I also experienced horrific medical violence at UIHC while seeking spine care, and UIHC's delays in care caused me to develop a permanent disability. I filed complaints that resulted in gaslighting from hospital administrators, and no action was taken. Some of the people who hurt me still work here. 6 years ago, I burned the clothes I wore while being assaulted at UIHC and spread the ashes on the Pentecost lawn while taking the stand at this event in 2018, specifically in your section over there. I work for the institution that I was sexually assaulted at, and I don't just do any work. I specialize in working with medical violence survivors, most of whom were sexually assaulted at UIHC. Most of them did not receive justice. For the last 7 years, I regularly went into the building I was sexually assaulted in to help others get the health care that they deserved. My experiences with being assaulted here and working to help those who experience similar violence have changed me in ways I cannot quantify in words. If nothing else, I am brave. I am stronger than I've ever been. I have faced my own monsters every day to help other people heal. Everything I did was for survivors, and I regret nothing because the only thing you can take with you when you die is that which you've already given away. And the thing that I gave away was my heart and time. Well, I take that back, actually. I do regret one thing. You see, I've never rage quit a job.
So I loved my job at RVAP so much that I probably would have worked here until I retired if the university hadn't have dissolved us. I thought I blew my chance to rage quit because I could never see myself quitting RVAP. This was never just a job to me. This was my life's passion. And then I got my layoff letter. I still can't technically rage quit RVAP because I have to do the responsible thing and take the time to transition all of my clients to someone safe who can care for them. But I can do the next best thing. I can rage resign. I learned yesterday that the reason RVAP staff were not informed of the decision to dissolve us is because they thought we'd put up resistance. They said that if we had been particularly resistant in the past to changes that were suggested in the University of Iowa's 2022 program review. What were the changes they suggested in that review, you ask? Eliminating the Queer Health Advocates Program, eliminating doula services, a service which is, by the way, more heavily utilized by women of color than our other services. They suggested eliminating non-traditional support groups and no longer providing therapy. All of these were services more likely to be utilized by marginalized survivors or survivors with complex trauma. What did the review suggest that we focus on? Services labeled core services. That means advocacy at forensic medical examinations, police stations, and the courts. And these are, of course, very valuable, but core services are centered almost entirely around carceral justice frameworks that victims are less likely to engage with. These services were more likely to be consumed by white cis women than the other services that we had. And they were mad that we didn't just shut up, throw marginalized survivors under the bus, and do what they told us to do. University of Iowa, you have lied to the press. You said the grants would transfer seamlessly to DVIP, but the funders announced that our grants, which you surrendered, will go competitive to whoever has the best application. And at a time when all victim service programs are soon to experience major cuts from the Victims of Crime Act funding. You said we had 12 employees, but we had 19, and you forgot to tell the 7 overnight staff that I supervise, and I had to frantically call them before they could read your hastily sent division-wide email. You quoted figures gathered from people who barely understood our database software. You said it was because we didn't serve enough UI-affiliated survivors, yet the history points to anti-DEI sentiments. We saw pushback from UI when we hired male and transgender advocates. We saw pushback when we stopped focusing exclusively on white, middle-class, college-aged women. We even got pushback when we insisted on continuing to serve children. It's not about budgets or the number of students served. It was about the fact that we strayed from maintaining the status quo. You said there would be no interruption of services, and maybe 5 people on this Pentecrest believe you. And I sincerely hope that there isn't one. But it also puts it on the back of local nonprofits who are already very stressed out. And considering the number of people who told us that we saved their lives, people may die because of your decision to dissolve us in the sloppiest way possible. In my time here, I have been held hostage. Human traffickers have become familiar with my car. I have been stalked by police and colleagues. I have watched the worst things that humanity has to offer happen right in front of me as I tried to stop them. I spent the last 6 months experiencing and witnessing workplace bullying and discrimination from an interim director. I have PTSD because of this job, and I did it all for $43,000 a year. I don't regret the things that I sacrificed for the well-being of survivors.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I shouldn't have had to sacrifice my physical safety and mental health for a job. To my coworkers, I am better because I met you. My colleagues are nationally recognized in our field. I have learned more about how to be a good human from all these people than I could have explained here in my short time. Most of my friends say that I have wisdom, and I want you to know that it came from my colleagues. Katrine, You are the best supervisor that I've ever had, and this place never deserved you. I can only hope that someday I am as good at loving people as you are. It is very painful to me to leave you and my other colleagues knowing that I have already spent the maximum of time that I will get with you allotted on this earth merely by the fact that I won't see you every day like I do right now. Please take care of your heart. And I know it's difficult for you, but please put yourself first. Just this once. You have to put on your oxygen mask before you can help all the people that you want to help. Thank you to the hundreds of dedicated RVAP volunteers I taught and supervised. Helping you grow has been one of the greatest honors of my life. Thank you to the volunteers I supervised who died or were murdered during my time here, Allie Davis and Molly Tibbetts. Your lives were so short, but you helped so many people, and I will carry you with me. But most importantly, thank you to the survivors. You are the people I am most bereaved about leaving. Thank you for sharing your joys and your sorrows. Thank you for allowing me to attend the births of your children, your court dates, your surgeries, and to be there for you in hours of need. Thank you for sharing your lives with me, even when it was hard to let someone in. And most importantly, thank you for letting me save your lives. I'm sorry I had to leave this way. And to the survivors I worked with who died while in my care, I'm so glad that I got to be there for you during the short time that you were on Earth. And I will never forget you. This is my early resignation. My last day at RVAP will be May 10th, 2024.
Iowa City World